General Robert E. Lee, the legendary commander of the Confederate Army, was visibly agitated, a rare sight for a man known for his calm demeanor. His frustration simmered as he faced a perfect storm of miscommunication, disobedience, and missed opportunities. Why was Lee so anxious? Why did his trusted generals Longstreet, Stuart, Ewell, and others fail to execute his plans? And how did these critical mistakes lead to one of the most devastating Confederate failures of the Civil War? In this Civil War episode, we unravel the dramatic story of Lee's frustrations at Gettysburg. From vague orders and reluctant commanders to the high-stakes consequences of poor communication, we explore how the Confederacy's best chance at victory slipped through their fingers. What went wrong on that fateful day? And how did Lee's leadership style contribute to the chaos? Join us as we dive into the mistakes, missteps, and missed opportunities that shaped the Battle of Gettysburg and ultimately the fate of the Civil War. But before we proceed, kindly subscribe to Irish History to support us and hit the notification bell. On the morning of July 2nd, 1863, General Robert E. Lee appeared to be angry and anxious. Many who had traveled with him over the course of the last year of campaigning noted that Lee was not at his ease and more anxious and ruffled than I have ever seen him before. One can understand Lee's frustration. He was angry. He was angry at General Stuart for failing to follow his directions, although his orders to Stuart were vague and confusing and had opened the door for Stuart's absence. Stuart had left Lee without his best cavalry commanders and units, and those at Lee were unavailable because of how Lee had deployed them. Lee was also displeased with Harry Haight for disobeying his instructions not to bring on a general engagement, and equally displeased with Corps Commander Powell Hill for letting it happen. Lee was also frustrated with Ewell, Rhodes, and Early of Second Corps. They had resisted Lee's suggestion of renewing the main attack in their sector. They also objected to leaving their positions around Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill, feeling that to give up hard-won ground would demoralize their troops. Instead, they offered to support an attack on the right when it started, but Lee left no exact instructions for them to do so. Lee was beset by a situation he had never found himself in before. It was as if the attitude of these high-ranking officers was strangely out of keeping with the aggressive spirit of the Army of Northern Virginia. Instead of offering their commander hearty cooperation and eagerness to respond positively to his suggestions, they gave him objections and reasons why they should not do certain things. But even more importantly, Lee was frustrated by the attitude and actions of his old war horse, Pete Longstreet of First Corps. Longstreet was vehemently opposed to Lee's plan to attack. Lee had told him the previous night, "If the enemy is there tomorrow, we must attack him." Longstreet's reply, "If he is there, it will be because he is anxious that we should attack him a good reason, in my judgment, for not doing so," failed to deter Lee from his plans. Lee became even more anxious when returning from a visit to Ewell at mid-morning to find neither the Hood nor McLaws divisions of Longstreet's had yet to step off to the attack. There is much controversy in what happened, as no copy of a plan of attack exists, and there are conflicts in how the key participants remember the meetings. Lee obviously believed that Longstreet would mount an early attack. Longstreet claimed that no order was given to attack until he returned from his trip to Ewell. Early in the morning, Lee still was unaware of the location of most of the Federal Army or where its flanks were. He knew that the Federal Army occupied favorable ground and had good interior lines. He also knew that his forces were spread out over a wide arc, which made it hard for each of his corps to render support to the others. Likewise, he had no cavalry with him to make a reconnaissance, and the officers that he dispatched to make a reconnaissance gave him faulty information indicating that there were no Federal troops between him and the Round Tops. His battle plan for July 2nd hinged on factors that he did not control. First, it depended on his scouts' report that there were no Federal troops between Cemetery Ridge and the Round Tops, and that the Round Tops were undefended. Theoretically, had the information that he received about the Federal positions been accurate, it would have been a good plan. Longstreet's corps attacking en echelon with McLaws, leading supported by Hood, and Anderson's division from Hill's corps. His second assumption, based on the scouting report, was that General Meade lacked either the troops or the inlet to anchor his left flank properly. Meade proved him wrong on both counts. Likewise, though Lee explained the concept of attack to McLaws, none of the other commanders, Longstreet, Porter, Hood, or Anderson, recounted being given those instructions. Despite that, Lee was determined to take the offense and categorically rejected any possibility of going over to a defensive posture. With his senior commanders each causing him trouble, Lee dug in his heels in order to assert his authority. He would not, increasingly he could not, alter his plan. Thus Lee went ahead and forced a reluctant and recalcitrant Longstreet to attack, even when it became apparent that Federal troops occupied the ground that he was planning to attack in strength. Lee's intent was again garbled. Though Lee explained his concept of attack to McLaws, none of the other commanders, Longstreet, Porter, Hood, or Anderson, recounted being given those instructions. As such, the coordinated attack and echelon never took place, and this was compounded by Longstreet's failures in leading the attack that day. Once again, the Confederate onslaught appeared that it might sweep the field, but again it fell short at great cost of life. The Confederate attacks were uncoordinated. Corps commanders did not control division commanders, and division commanders operating independently of each other failed to coordinate their attacks. As a result, all failed, despite the gallantry and initiative exercised by Confederate soldiers, who, according to some Confederate commanders, was the best they had ever fought. Lee was a burdened man. The war had aged him greatly. Though he was still only the commander of the Army of Northern Virginia, he also had on his mind what was going on in other theaters. He was burdened by the knowledge that the South was depending on him for victory, and he had forced the issue of invading the North. The crux of the matter was that after the loss of Jackson, Lee never altered his manner of command. Lee exercised his command of the Army of Northern Virginia through his corps commanders. Each was expected to understand the overall plan and his specific role within it. Once he conveyed his intentions, Lee assumed the role of observer. Although he knew almost all of his senior commanders, including their strengths and limitations, as commanders, he did not adjust his command style to those factors. One has said quite correctly that Lee did not think of his general suitability to the nature of their assignments. This was critical. He depended on Longstreet to act with the swiftness of Jackson, of Hill to control his corps, Stuart to maintain contact, and Ewell to support his course of action. In each case, he failed to grasp how each man needed a different leadership style, and did not effectively communicate his directions to them. There were chances to win the day had Lee or any of his commanders exercised proper command and control of their units. Men who had seldom failed Lee over the past year made mistakes and acted in manners contradictory to their previous performance of duty. Perhaps in some cases this was due to their inexperience in working directly for Lee, or in others' lack of sensitivity to the nuance of Lee's command style that Jackson understood so well. This compounded the mistakes that Lee made in returning to the offensive and leaving Ewell's command in a place where it could not lend its weight to his attack. In the end, Lee's toleration of the shortcomings of his subordinates that day lessened the chances of Confederate success. Lee conducted the battle in a manner that had to be his worst performance of the war. His loose style of command, coupled with the extended lines of his army, was insufficient. Unlike Meade, Hancock, and others on the Federal side, Lee took little personal role in the events of the day, receiving only one report and issuing one order after the battle was joined. He was joined in this by his senior commanders, especially Hill and Ewell, though Longstreet did venture in and take control of the fighting in the Peach Orchard. Porter Alexander described what he saw as the utter absurdity of the Confederate position, which made it preposterous to hope to win a battle when so strung out and separated that cooperation between the three corps was impossible except by miracle. He observed that comparatively little pains was exercised to bring about either. Porter Alexander's comments go to the heart of what went wrong on the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg. Lee assumed that his subordinates would act as Jackson would, and he ignored his own best advice. In the end, it set high up for disaster on July 3rd, as he still continued to believe that he could take the Federal position and with that win the war. Lee's frustrations at Gettysburg remind us that even the greatest leaders are human, flawed, burdened, and capable of mistakes. His story is a testament to the weight of leadership and the high stakes of history. But could Lee have won at Gettysburg if his orders had been clearer? Or was the Confederacy's fate already sealed by the time the battle began? And what does this moment teach us about the importance of leadership in times of crisis? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you're a history buff, dive deeper into the memoirs of Lee, Longstreet, or Meade to explore their perspectives. And if you're just starting your journey into history, hit that subscribe button and join the Eyes on the Past. Don't forget to let us know in the comments. What do you think was the biggest mistake at Gettysburg? Thanks for watching.